Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the latest edition of the Woke Bros. Of course, I'm your co-host, Big Waz, aka Waz Lambray, and I'm joined for the first time ever down in Texas, partners. My man, David Griscom. What's going on, brother?
Man, I'm really happy to be here on Woke Bros after all this time.
Dude, it's crazy. It's just wild that I've never had you on. I'm just like, because you just recently had me on Left Reckoning. I'm like, bro, why don't I bring Dave up here so we can have a little fun, man? Once again, congrats on the nuptials. I was blessed enough to be in the building for that. Just a magical night, beautiful wedding. Shouts to Ani and her whole family, the Grishcoms as well. It was just a wonderful affair, man. I'm truly grateful to have been a part of it, bro.
Oh man, no, seriously, thank you for coming. We had a really great time. It was funny. I was hearing after the fact some of my college friends and stuff. Didn't recognize you when they were speaking to you, and then like the day after, they're like, "Oh shit," applause. I listened to, which is pretty fun.
Yeah, man, it's kind of crazy, honestly. Even still, as long as I've been doing this shit, whenever I meet people out in the wild who are fans of the shit that I do, like that shit is still, that'll never get old to me, man. Like that people like I'll just meet and be like, "Yo, we really fuck with you guys' work." So I'm grateful for that, man. But yeah, just a dope day. But yeah, I wanted to get you up here, Dave, because obviously Left Reckoning is wrecking shop out here on these leftist streets. And you know what? I'm a proud leftist, as I know that you are, although on the internet it can be kind of hard to be, man. I'm not gonna lie. There's certain people that's carrying the flag that I'm just like, God damn, are you miserable, insufferable? I understand why people hate us types, but I appreciate that we got people like you who are very plain spoken, very practical about how it is we can go about achieving our aims, man, to make this more just society for more and more people. You feel me?
And I mean, I really appreciate that. I mean, like for me, it's like, I mean, I'm not gonna be one of these guys who's like, "Oh, I'm not a leftist" or something like that. Like I'm on the left, but yeah, 100%. For me, like my politics is about like making life better for working class people, and
Yeah.
like I don't know, playing around with like the ego of like strange folks on the computer who want to drape themselves in a million different flags from the past is not really why I'm in this.
And by the way, I don't consider that to be a moral stance taken on myself. Part of it is quite selfish. I think if everybody else were more prosperous, it'd be better for everybody. Like including myself. Like this isn't some altruistic endeavor. It's like, bro, I think our society would function in such a way where there'd be less people, throwing up on themselves on the train, maybe having an episode because of, some mental health issues, and then performing a violent act on a 57-year-old, Guatemalan woman on the J train. Like, a lot of this stuff isn't even about like altruism. It's like, bruh, this shit's just gonna be better.
Dude, it's always funny too, like when wingers and stuff like they, the Margaret Thatcher quote that they all love to use is,
What's that?
The problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money, right? They love that quote so much, and it's like you'll get this two people like, oh well, David, you're a socialist, but yet you like get paid for your work. It's like, dude, that's like the whole point. That is like what our stuff is about. Is we're saying that people don't get paid enough for their work because there's a whole parasite class taking money from folks,
or that you don't live in a trailer. Like that you don't live in a trailer park, that you have a decent apartment. Like whenever your life is decent, people who are skeptical of, socialism or, materialism or whatever dialectical materialism, whatever you want to fucking call it, right? People are just like, well, Waz, you drive a Ford Bronco and don't ride a skateboard everywhere. It's just like, bro, what are you talking about?
And, I don't know, like people who watch my program will know that like, one of the things that I'm really against are the people who sort of want like leftism or socialism or whatever you want to call it to be about like a kind of vow of poverty. And it's like, no, it's actually aspirational. It's like, I think nice things are good. And I think that people should be able to have nice
more
things.
More people should be able to participate with it. And you know what? I'm glad we're on this subject because let's face it, Dave, we are on the upper echelon of society's pecking order, you and I, especially in our peer group and like our proximity to myself as a white collar worker, just period, and our proximity to that class of people. I feel like when you're talking to them about our shared politics, there's this idea that they think people like going to fancy restaurants
Mm.
because nobody else can get into them. Where I'm just like, nah, I like having good food.
That is a good point though. It's like you never know who you're sitting next to somewhere, right? Because yeah, there are people who like yeah.
100%. And I'm just like, bro, like this whole status thing,
Hmm.
and I think we all participate in status symbols. I understand that, man, but rarely is it like, yo, I'm like, I don't know, like I'm a part of this exclusive club of people who can get this reservation or who could blah blah blah. It's like, bro, I'm happy that I'm able to be tapped in to, take my family somewhere cool when we want to go out and have a shared experience. Anyway, that's enough of me
Yeah.
carping about people dissing, you know, the left.
Weird times right now, though, for sure.
So I wanted to just get you up here to talk about, to me, what's really the only relevant thing in politics at the moment. Here we are in May of an election year. We already know who the candidates are. Uh, we've known for basically 4 years. That's the sad part. This is about as anticlimactic as it gets. I don't know if you saw Biden just gave that speech, I mean, excuse me, that interview to CNN because he's
Hmm.
finally doing press. Obviously, a lot of people have pointed out that this guy has done less press than any president in like basically the modern era. And
Hmm.
he did CNN, and I don't know. I thought it was whatever. Not that I necessarily agree with everything, all the views that he articulated, but I think with Biden, everybody's just looking for him to string together 4 sentences
Yeah.
of coherence in a row, and it's like some huge win. I don't know if you checked that out. What did you think about his latest media appearance?
I mean, it was interesting because I mean, I think the big takeaway was he made some kind of signal that like there was going to start to be some restrictions on American weaponry that was going to Israel, which is obviously something that's desperately needed, and it's been wild to see though that just like less than 24 hours, we've already started to see some statements coming from the White House, sort of walking back
Unbelievable.
those statements from the Biden administration. So now it's just very unclear as to like whether or not there's actually any like significant commitment. Yeah, I mean, like I think that a lot of people are really into his State of the Union. I think whatever cocktail they put him on for that, they need to find a way to keep using that. I guess you don't want it to wear off over time. But I mean, look, this is somebody who, the speech he gave about anti-Semitism, putting that in
Hmm.
quotes because they're conflating, opposition to the slaughter of Palestinian people with that, which is pretty despicable for a lot of reasons. I mean, this is somebody who, in a lot of ways, feels like he's been on autopilot for a
Yeah.
while, and it's really worrying when you are seeing what's going on with the right wing in this country.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the funny thing about, I think, a lot of the arguments that are made by the Democrats. It's this, that I feel like that to them is what they think is their strongest argument, is about the rabid, unhinged nature of the right wing right now, and that they're this bulwark against, unsanctioned, just right wing uh psychosis, right, within the government. But when you see the way they move and operate, it doesn't feel that way. Right.
Mm.
I don't think any citizen really looks at the Democrats as operating in some state of emergency, DEFCON 1 level scaredness, or in vis-a-vis their relationship to the right wing, in particular the right wing generally, and the Republicans specifically, whose speaker they just saved from being ousted in the
Hmm.
House. Right. It's quite hilarious how often they collaborate on so many things on out of one side of their mouth, and then the basically the Biden playbook to, suburban voters, college grads, is that, look, these guys are unhinged. We're the steady hand. We're
Mhm.
the people that are going to keep the ship, sort of on the right course.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the worrying thing is that like the quote unquote like adults in the room like aren't even like good at being functionaries or like managers of like the neoliberal state, right? Like this state that has, failed working people for decades now. We're seeing a government that is really incapable like even doing the things that like it might want to do. I think we saw that a lot with like COVID policy, for example. I mean, you saw that like the state, you look at how much money was basically given to the elites during that period of time. And like, there's an aspect to that where it's like, that's just like the only infrastructure that this country has when it comes to
That's it.
government policies. Like the only thing they can
Yeah.
do is just give money to rich folks. It was really difficult for them to figure out, okay, how can we sort of help out everyday folks? I mean, it's like that kind of thing is just really worrying to see. And then, yeah, you've seen like the Biden administration and like even like the Inflation Reduction Act, which is like the biggest and most significant
Hmm.
thing that the Biden administration has done.
Legitimate accomplishment on Biden's part. You can't take that away from him.
But even that, I mean, a lot of that is like incentives for private industry to do
Hmm.
certain kind of environmental policies that the government wants to do, right? It's a far cry from like FDR, who's like, hey, the South doesn't have electricity. We're going to create this new thing called the Tennessee Valley Authority, which like modernized and revolutionized the South, like literally changed people's lives. And
Hmm.
the climate change, green transition, all these kind of things are a similar kind of opportunity to do that kind of thing. And instead, it's like, oh, we'll give some tax credits to some like green capitalists, green industrialists. And, there's a big aspect to that. Is like, it's not even, I mean, 100% is a preference of these folks because it's how they think about politics, it's how they think about government. But really, it's just like that muscle has atrophied so much in the Democratic Party that like to do like an FDR style program, like they just don't have the guys, in the room who can figure out how to do that kind of thing.
That's the interesting thing. I like. So I don't know if you saw a few months ago, there was like this beef between the Defense Department and Elon for some shit that
Yeah.
Tesla is providing the defense industry. And the funny thing to me is I'm like, why can't our government just use the government's might to do it itself? Why do we have to go find Elon to
Hmm.
do things that, especially in defense, where we like, this is like, it's like the number one thing allegedly that our
Yeah, that we're
government
good
is
at.
there to do, to handle, is military defense. Why does even that need to be outsourced? Let alone the building of a bridge, let alone, the road work and all. Like, why does this need to be, contracted out to the Elons of the world to make him even more powerful?
I mean, look, it's because I mean, literally, these guys have, this government has like really turned the entire state apparatus into betas. Frankly, I mean, they really have embodied this idea, that government shouldn't do anything, and the government does something is going to be bad. So they outsource literally everything. I mean, we were talking on Left Reckoning, Matt Leck and I, my co-host, about some New York program that they're doing where the governor Hochul is going on about how like, oh, we're going to help young African American kids like learn how to use AI, right? And but how many versions of that have you heard, right? Code. We'll put
They're gonna
iPads in
code. They're
schools,
gonna do this. Yeah.
and really, it's like we know what the problem is rich people, our schools are underfunded because rich people
Yeah.
are able to hoard too much money,
Yeah.
and we know that if we invested in these schools, children would have better lives, right? It's like, we don't need a new technology, but they can't do that. So instead it's like, oh, we're going to unleash the free market, or the power of the
Yeah.
market.
The
And,
power of the market is just gonna save some kid in East New York, Brooklyn.
and
Just
it's,
makes no sense
the
whatsoever.
funniest thing though is you talk about a divided country. It's the exact same thing in rural America too. It's
Mm,
it's a little bit different as to how they talk about it, but it's like the same thing. It's
sure.
like, oh, what these kids need is broadband, right? Don't get me wrong. It's like having access to internet is like a good thing for
Of
people,
course
whatever.
the
But
kids
it's like
need
it's the only thing
broadband.
they can think of. It's like, all right, if we just
Yeah.
we'll get the computers into schools, and then like everyone's life will get better. It's like, no, I mean, the reason that people have been able to make a lot of money in tech and stuff is because they were able to get early access to an industry and then sort of sit on top of it as rent seekers. I mean, that's like what Bill Gates has done in all
Mhm.
those folks. And I know, like, to get it back to like the Biden administration stuff. I mean, really, you're seeing that Biden, in a lot of ways, a lot of times when people talk about Biden, we're talking about his like stability and his mental capacity. But I think as we learned under Trump, there really is just like a kind of group of folks. It's like what Trump called like the deep state,
Uh-huh.
but like Marxists might call it something like the state apparatus or something like that,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Um, like those people end up having a lot of influence over folks like Biden. And that's why, like, you saw, like, Trump did all these awful things, but like there were people basically sort of, pushing him to do certain things. And, same thing with
Career
Biden.
bureaucrats.
Yeah.
These people aren't on election cycles. They just work in
Yeah.
the within the power structure. Like they don't get elected. They don't run for office. They like these are nameless, faceless, powerful bureaucrats who, like, and I do wonder if some truly radical person ever got elected, what they could really do.
Oh, no.
Like,
Yeah. It would
like
be.
realistically do.
Here's the thing is, like, I know we were all really big on Bernie, and I think,
Yes.
I don't think that was a mistake or anything. It was exactly the
Yeah.
right thing to do and to fight for. But I remember our friend Bhaskar Shakar, founder of Jacobin. I remember sitting on a TMBS episode when he was in there, and Bhaskar said something. I was so mad at him for saying what he was saying, but he's right. He was saying, like, Bernie Sanders' presidency was going to be really disappointing. And it was because of all of these things that we're talking about. It's like, Lord, can you imagine the kind of revolt you would see from the kind of executive branch bureaucrats if Bernie Sanders was the president of the United States? You saw what happened under Trump. Right. And, Trump just wanted to like harm people and do nasty things to make rich people better.
Yeah.
But, the fact is, like, there is this, the state is like an entity that's almost outside of like that direct electoral politics. And like, you have to think about ways like, and that doesn't mean that it's like, we don't need to be conspiratorial about it. It's just literally the people who make the decisions and have the ability to carry out these things, have an agenda of their own, have an ideology of their own. And somebody like Bernie Sanders would be against it. That's why you see, sometimes these like policies, even from Democrats that might sound good, get really watered down over time. It's because it goes through this group of folks. So to fight that, to deal with that, we were going to have like a mass movement of people, not just to win the election, which would have been like incredible if it happened in the first place, but like a union movement, a working class movement that was going to be able to push the
Right.
state to do that kind of stuff. And it just didn't exist under Bernie.
Yeah, there would have to be, um the masses would have to be corralled into some sort of institution that could, again, work as a leverage point, the way that the evangelical church say, right?
Yeah.
Like that, like say what you want about what their aims are, but because its power is institutionalized, it's not just a bunch of people who love God
Mm-hmm.
together. Like, no, like it's an entire apparatus, right? It's an institution. And through that institution, because they have people backing it, they can go out and make demands and lever. And look, they started this abortion thing 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
they just got that shit through. Okay. Like, and look, it took them 40 years.
And it's what's interesting about it too is that, like, if you look at the right and how it's like develops itself, is that you have like I don't know, maybe we call them the foot soldiers, right? If it's not too tortured of a metaphor. And it's the kind of like Christian moms who are like mad about
Mhm,
abortion, and are mad that, like,
mhm,
the teachers are reading children's books where like
mhm.
there's two
They're the
dads
ones
or
that
something
show up
like
to
that.
the PA meetings. Yeah.
But
PTA
the
meetings.
but
Yeah.
the policy people are all like free market fanatic
Yeah.
fundamentalist people. And what's an
Yeah.
interesting thing that political movement has done is they basically have tied like that kind of Christian reaction, right, that exists in America, as a kind of like, those are the everyday folks, and then like that kind of ideological state apparatus, or like the people behind it, are these guys who are like, all right, we need to cut taxes, get rid of regulations, things like that, which is not necessarily what all of these like hyper
Of
Christian folks
course
want. But
not.
what you end up getting is a lot. The things that you're saying
What
is
does
like,
deregulation have to do with Jesus?
no, yeah,
Absolutely
exactly.
nothing.
No, I mean, like, the Lord is trying to create, the kingdom of God for us. We're talking about rules and structure here, not this kind of hippie free for all. No, I mean, it's true, and it's really wild. I mean, here in Texas, it's incredible to see the difference in political opinion, even from Republicans, and like what actually like the law actually ends up becoming here. It's just an interesting thing about how that group of people, those like free market fundamentalists who basically run the Republican Party, have sort of found ways to attach themselves to whatever these kind of like cultural grievance politics.
Whatever's happening on the ground.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And again, it's always in service of the greater, bigger thing, which is deregulating, defunding, de-everythinging, everything to the studs, and making sure that, we try to rip off as many arms of the state as possible, which is, and the best part about this to me, and I know this conversation is going all over the place, bear with us, listeners, but my favorite part about all of this and these Milton Friedman sickos is that they're like, we want to get rid of public schools
yeah.
so that tax money can go to private actors to fund schools. Yet out of that same mouth, they will say citizens directly being funded by the government is bad and fucked up. Like, I don't see how people don't understand the hypocrisy in that. Like the idea that the state needs to die. No state healthcare, make that private. No state schools, make that private. No state, company that builds a road, the public road, make that private. But
I mean,
yet how these quote unquote businesses fund themselves is from money from the government. It's no different than a welfare check. It's insane to me.
but here, like schools is a perfect example of like how the right functions here. It's like people like school. No, I mean people don't like school, but like people like their public schools, right? For the most part, in this country, right? It's like a social good, especially like here in Texas in the South, right? Like your high school football team like matters to people in a way that it doesn't, might seem odd to folks in other places. They've been trying to do school privatization here forever, and even though they have Republicans in control, every single time they do, particularly in rural Texas, they'll be like, "Hey, what is this going to mean for our football team, or for like our jobs and stuff like that?" But like it's a good thing. This is why we like public goods because they're social, right? So what does the right have to do? Well, they can't fight the teachers directly because teachers are popular with people. Oh, but what if we start saying that those teachers are grooming your kids and they're doing
Oh
weird
my
sexual stuff?
God.
I'm sorry, like the whole kind of reactionary social politics that we're seeing right now that the right's pushing is a lot of it is about trying to find ways to attack schools because they can't do it directly. Because everyday people actually like their schools and their teachers. But if you start to make it seem like, oh, there's some dangerous stuff going on at the school, then it's like, yeah, we need to privatize it and give it to, I guess, a bunch of, unsupervisable rich people, by the way, which
It's
is
just insane as an idea that the government should pay for private actors to run schools and then allow those private actors, which again, even when you're getting government funding, these people don't think that there should be any oversight on the shit that they do. It's I don't know, like when you actually read the ideology out loud, it's so ghoulish and scary, dude. Like, the shit that they did in like places like Chile and all over the place, like Argentina and places like that, where it was just like, yo, there's no need for a state.
It's scary stuff.
except to pay private actors to run the daily lives of its citizens, in terms of goods and services. Just nuts. I did want to ask you about the protest because I don't think the school protest because I don't think we've covered that on Woke Bros here. Mainly because I don't know. I think God bless these kids. I hope they don't get their heads bashed in by the freaking police. Like, I don't think this stuff students can actually make a difference on foreign policy specifically, man. I feel like the foreign policy of America is probably the most tightly controlled aspect of American government policy. Like I feel like it's the most cordoned off. I forget where I was listening to our guy Danny Bessner talk, and he talked about like the second New Deal. This is what this was all about. They went out and did some polling on like the proletariat, essentially,
Mhm.
David. And these people were like, the bureaucrats are like, yo, these people are wholly ignorant on stuff like foreign policy and this that and the third. And so therefore we need to create a class of an expert class to completely run this, and this will be completely cut off from the democratic process.
Mhm.
Normal people should have and won't have any say in stuff like foreign policy. This will strictly be the domain of the experts, and this was done deliberately. This didn't happen by accident, right? Like, this just didn't evolve out of how our country was going. Like, our freaking government officials decided that we were going to create an expert class, and there were going to be segments of how we governed that would just be completely cordoned off from the people, and national security or whatever, foreign
Mhm.
policy, whatever the euphemism these cocksuckers are using, um, is one of those, right? So I'm not gonna lie, but I would never say, yo, just give up and don't do anything, because I think that's anti-politics.
Mm.
But at the same time, when I see it from my couch, I'm not too moved in any direction. I don't want to see kids get hurt or beat up, but at the same time, they're protesting. So these people have steeled themselves to think that they're taking a stance against the state. And so I think these folks is ready for some level of police contact. So I'm not like pearl clutching, to be honest, as much as like
Mhm.
a lot of people on the left are. I like, just, because UT had a really, you're in Austin, UT had a very
Brutal.
viral
Yeah.
situation with the
They
cops. There
didn't
was
even
no
start the
tape in all
protest
of
before
this.
the cops started beating on people.
Wow.
Um, I don't know if I'm as pessimistic as you on it. I think that, like, no, I mean, what you're saying about like the foreign policy in general is like, we like American liberalism, and I don't mean that even like it's like the Democratic Party's like liberal democracy. They've always feared like the mob or the masses, right? So they've always
Yes.
wanted to keep power away from people as much as possible, which is why I think that we're seeing such a crackdown about what's happening on
Of
college campuses,
course.
because it's too simple. It's too simple of a message, frankly. Um, we don't want to drop bombs on mothers and children in an open air prison. And specifically, the university students are saying we don't want our universities, which a lot of them are highly financially entangled with this process. We don't want our university tuitions to go to this process. It's actually so simple that like it can't exist to these university presidents who are just big business guys at this point. You know, right? It's like the university colleges in this country, as our good friend Danny Bessner said on Bill Maher, is that the university has become like a product for
Hmm.
students, right?
Always.
And I mean, I can understand having a little bit of pessimism about Joe Biden being moved on these things. You know, I think that like the little glimmer that we saw in that CNN conversation we had he had earlier this week, and we're talking about earlier, does show that there's like been some effect. I think it's going to be sort of limited, but I think that fundamentally, what this is showing to hopefully the American people, and I know certainly to the Palestinian people, is that it is a small sliver of elites in this country who want to see this mass slaughter campaign continue. And it
Yeah.
doesn't represent us. And I think that even on that level, I think that that's something that's worth like going out there and showing to the world. Um,
Yeah, I look. I think it's worth doing as well. Again, I don't. It's hard for me to get too riled up about it. I think
but even on the level of
stuff
like
that.
free speech, does it not rile
Yeah,
you up? I
no.
mean,
Of course. Like, I love that they're doing it
mhm.
for sure. It's just on a pure calculation status, man. Like,
Well, things are bleak. I mean, I think if what you're saying is I mean, I think one of the things that's really difficult about this, and this will get some people mad when I say this, but it's like, there's a lot of energy around this, and rightfully so, and it's important. Just like there was a lot of energy around like Black Lives Matter, for example, a few years ago, and that was
mhm.
really important too. And I never said that participating in those marches or anything like wasn't worthwhile or important,
Hell yeah.
but we got to translate that into something that is political and can last throughout like the news cycle. Like, I'm not trying to be cynical
Mm.
about it, but it's just like, every time, like when something like this happens, people are calling up, making new connections and things like that. And then people fight for a while and then, they dissipate. And it's like, man, you need to like, we need to have something that's permanent that could last, from a Bernie Sanders presidential run to like Black Lives
Right.
Matter protests, the Palestine things.
And
And we
and
never
and that's
construct that.
why I want to give a shout out to my brother Jared Ball, who's been up here a couple of times. We need a church. The left needs a church. We need something to ground this thing,
Yeah.
to
Well, we need a party.
corral this
Yeah.
shit. We need something, even if it's not a party, Dave. Like like it can be viewed as a unified front,
Hmm.
right? And so that the actual energy can be harvested in such a way where it's just like, yo, if y'all don't do this, this church, this party, this group will actually move uniformly against what you're doing, right? And that takes time and it's tough, and I get it, but I think that's why so many of our movements end up just evaporating into thin air. And I know people get very cynical about BLM,
Hmm.
because of the clownish behavior of some of the people that were very front facing within the movement. I'm not somebody who conflates the quote unquote leadership, in
Hmm.
so much as there even was one, of BLM with the genuine energy of actual people, multiracial, multi-background coalition of people who were about what was happening on those streets.
Hmm.
Like, I'm not one of those people. I'm of two minds. I think a lot of these people who made themselves into leaders were very self-interested dickheads who scam their way into mad money, scam their way into DI bullshit ass jobs and positions on boards and all of the crap that neoliberalism has to offer us whenever they talk about they giving us a progressive, race
Kente
forward
cloth.
class, yeah, idea. Yeah, they got to participate in that because they were most proximate to that class of people.
Mm.
And I think that shit was bullshit. But like, I don't think you can say just because that happened, therefore there was not a genuine movement and energy of people behind a cause, a unified idea of just like, yo, maybe the state don't need to be this repressive on fucking people every single day. And maybe we should look at trying to make people's day-to-day lives better.
Mm.
And yeah, I just think we do need a way to harness that. You feel me? And just to spin this thing forward, man. I'm somebody who thinks the election is 50-50. I have no reason to think that Trump is somehow some major favorite right now. And obviously there's no reason to think that about Biden.
Hmm.
What do you think shores up a victory for Biden in November?
I mean, I think that Biden's best chance is going to
If
be,
he wins, if
yeah,
you're
yeah.
somebody in the Biden bubble, what's
Hmm.
the argument you're making for the idea that he'll win?
I mean, look, okay, if you're getting me in
David's
trouble
like, I
here.
don't know,
I can't
man.
do this, but no. I mean, like, I think I mean, Biden's advantage is literally that he's going up against Donald Trump, who is like,
Yes.
it is somebody who should be politics mode on easy, because Donald Trump is somebody who, like, as people get more reintroduced to him, I think that there is going to be a drop in some of his, because there are some people who are like sort of like reacting in an anti-Biden ways, like, oh, I don't like Biden, and might be forgetting Donald Trump's around the corner. I think that Biden, definitely the biggest advantage too is going to be abortion and things like that.
Hell yeah.
I just don't, that I think that is going to be a major factor for him either way, and it is, again, one of those things that I think sets them up for a layup, which is why I'm like so dour about the chances of Biden getting reelected, because I don't think that they're laying the groundwork for that right now. I think that, like, abortion in particular is something that, like, is really dangerous, the way that they've played with that issue, the Democratic Party, for both of our lives, and even before that, not codifying that, um, and that sets us up into a situation where, um, the way that they're like that they're not, see, to me, as somebody living in Texas, a state that has so effectively, like, banned it. It doesn't feel like for a lot of people here that like the Democratic Party is willing to fight for. So like what I think a lot of their abortion strategy right now is sort of for people in New York State, in California, being like, make sure you come out, because like abortion is on the ballot. I don't know. You can run up the numbers in New York and California at this point. Those are solid blue.
Yeah.
For a lot of people in these kind of places where it does feel like kind of like these things are like under threat, the Democratic Party hasn't really established itself as a party that's willing to fight for it. They're just the party that's not going to outright ban it.
Yeah. Yeah. The abortion thing, I think, definitely is in their favor. I think Donald Trump, as much as I think he can be pretty pragmatic on certain issues, like when he just plainly says, yo, Israel, wrap it up. The PR campaign, you're getting smoked on the PR front. Wrap it up. Like, it's just pragmatic. It's not like DC consultant class workshopped. It's just pragmatic. Like, as much as he can be good on the pragmatism stuff, like he can just be so freaking out there. And that stuff definitely scares the crap out of even a college educated white woman, where it's just like, God, this guy is pretty freaking, it's a little bit too much. And so I think that's their advantages, man. The absurdity on abortion that the Republicans and their pet Supreme Court has unleashed on the nation, and Donald Trump himself as just this unstable figure and a symbol for chaos.
It's been 3 presidential elections that the argument for the Democratic Party has basically been Donald Trump is bad. And look, I think that's a fair point, right? Yes, touche. But like eventually, like that might work, with a certain group of people forever. But I think that there's like a limit to how often you can do that before people are going to start being like, well, what is in this for me?
The thing is, we lived through the 4 years of Trump. Like nobody felt like there was like some earthquake every day.
Yeah, it was bad. Yeah, exactly. It was bad, but it wasn't the kind of stormtroopers on the ground thing.
Whatever.
Do you know who James Carville is?
Of course.
James Carville put out this video back in right before the election, before Hillary Clinton got defeated by Trump, where he like laid out the first like 100 days of a Donald Trump presidency, and it was a really wild like MSNBC fever dream. It included a shirtless Putin, but basically what happens is Trump gets elected and he gives a speech and basically invites the Russian army to take over America. Right? And it's just wild to hear that kind of stuff from these folks. You know what I mean? And it's like, again, like I'm not trying to minimize the real damage that somebody like Donald Trump did and will do. I think there's tremendous danger. Particularly, I mean, all the victories we've gotten in the labor movement over the past few years, seeing those under threat under a Trump administration would be really devastating for a labor movement that's getting a lot of momentum. So I'm not trying to deny that. I'm just saying, like, I just don't think you can be a winner in politics. And the Democratic Party just regularly chooses not to, because I think a lot of them are afraid of doing kind of mass Democratic politics in the sense of like appealing to the people, appealing to Brennan. But they're very DC focused.
People will get used to it.
They'll get ideas, right?
Yeah, they'll get ideas about the government working for them. Hey, man, David Griscom, thank you for coming on the show. Tell everybody where they could reach out to you, man, because obviously you're doing a lot of great work on behalf of the left of this goddamn country.
Well, thank you very much. Y'all can listen to Left Reckoning, which is on YouTube, Spotify, all the other podcast apps. You can follow me on Twitter at David Griscom. You can read my writing in Jacobin Magazine. I do a lot of Southern labor history. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, check that out.
I love it, man. Thank you for coming on. And that's our show, folks. Make sure you become a Patreon at patreon.com/Count the Dings for a lot of bonus Count the Dings content that we put out for you guys, man. We'll see you guys next time. Peace.